A vocal section of Millwall fans who've been branded an absolute disgrace for booing players as they took the knee in support of Black Lives Matter movement this weekend. Well, that's a taster of what went on. Millwall's match against Derby on Saturday was the first time their supporters were able to watch from the stands since the pandemic halted games, of course, in March. The jeering has drawn criticism from across the football community. Millwall FC themselves putting out a statement saying they were dismayed and saddened by the incident. Yesterday, Cabinet Minister George Eustice was accused of providing a shelter to racists after he failed to condemn the fans.
The issue of race and racial discrimination is something that we all take very, very seriously. My personal view is that Black Lives Matter, capital B, L and M, is actually a political movement that is different to what most of us believe in, which is standing up for racial equality.
I also noticed today James Cleverly, who's a government minister, did condemn the booing, but also suggested that it wasn't the worst thing in the world if you didn't get down onto one knee. He himself, of course, is a black minister in the government, in Boris Johnson's government. Let's speak in a moment to Weyman Bennett, co-governor of Stand Up to Racism First. Professor Ellis Cashmore, sociologist and author, is with us. Ellis, good to have you with us. So broadly, there's an interesting dynamic, many moving parts, all of those cliches going on in this one, I guess. Well, what do we make, firstly, of the booing of the gesture? What are your thoughts on that?
Let's start, Ian, if I may, by establishing that football fans are not like audiences, in the sense that they're not watching a movie or watching a concert. They are watching something of which they believe they are part. You know, this is a living, breathing organism, football, and the fans feel part of it. So they're not just objectively watching what's going on the field of play. They believe that the players down there are representing them in a genuine sense. And there are all sorts of historical reasons for that. So let's establish that. How do we interpret the events of the weekend? Well, I'm not going to automatically assume that everyone who booed is a racist. Definitely some were, and there is this scene at Walsall Football Club, and probably elsewhere all over the country, that is racist. No question about that. I'm not denying it, but there are also fans who are probably thinking, we've had enough of this. This is football. We come to watch a game of football, and our game is being hijacked by a political cause. There are probably even more other fans who, like me, are committed anti-racists, who have challenged and fought racism most of their lives, and feel that this has now become something of an empty gesture. And we remember what happened earlier this year to the NHS, when we used to go outside and clap every Thursday evening. And the NHS said, thank you very much. We appreciate your support. And it's honestly felt. But we believe now is a time to call a halt. And I think that we have arrived at that time in football.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a sense that I'm getting as well, Ellis, from this, is that the question that many of our listeners are asking, how long is this meant to go? Is this in perpetuity? I mean, in perpetuity, or what's the deal here?
Yeah, I think the impact has been made, Ian. I think football, the leagues, particularly Premier League and the EFL, have nailed their colours to the mast. They have defiantly said, traditionally, we don't get involved in political movements, but this is different. And we are committed to anti-discrimination of any kind, not just racial discrimination. And that is part of our credo. So we are going to support Black Lives Matter. They've done so. Everybody knows it's a global event, but now we can move on.
Isn't one of the other issues, perhaps, and again, I stand to be corrected on this, that the history of the taking the knee back to the civil rights movement, and it had perhaps a very different connotation then to now, and today they are inextricably linked with what happened in Minneapolis, what happened with George Floyd, subservience, apology, get on your knee to say sorry for your white privilege.
Ian, I
it's
don't buy
changed.
into any of this. The historical connotations, yes, they're there if you want to dig deep. This started with Kaepernick, Colin Kaepernick, the NFL player, who dropped to one knee, defiantly so, while the American national anthem was playing. It was a brilliant protest, actually, because people wanted to know why he made that gesture. And of course, he was then able to explain his case. And since then, it has gained momentum around the world. So it may well have different connotations. It does have different connotations. I mean, I know them and you know them. But what matters is the here and now, what it means today. And I think that that football has made its stance quite clear. It's obliged its clubs to observe what is, I think, a uniformly agreed upon good thing. I mean, I think it's to the benefit of the world. And I think it's done admirably to do so, to break with its past and say that, okay, political neutrality was our stance in the past, but now this is a new kind of movement, and we believe in it, and we are going to show that our heart's in the right place, kind of thing. But as you say, how long does it go on for before it loses its meaning and becomes what I believe it's in danger of becoming at the moment, and that is a ritual, and only a ritual.
Yeah. Ellis, thank you. Professor Ellis Cashmore, sociologist and author of Football's Dark Side, Corruption, Homophobia, Violence and Racism in the Beautiful Game. Let's speak with Weyman Bennett, co-governor of Stand Up to Racism. Always good to talk, Weyman. So give us firstly your overview on what happened at Wimbledon on Saturday.
Obviously, I'm a West Ham supporter, so I'm disappointed in Millwall. But I'll just say that I think it's appropriate that people show acts of solidarity with people if they want progress in a society. And I don't think there's been enough progress in our society. And for many of the players, it's a multiracial team and a multiracial sport. I think it's important that people take a stand on these issues. And I think it's an act of solidarity with the George Floyd family. And so therefore, I think that, it's been 400 years.
So you do correlate it to George Floyd directly then? This isn't about just a broader issue of improving race relations. You are linking it directly to that campaign.
Well, I'll be clear. It's also linked to Kick It Out. It's also linked to Show Racism the Red Card. It's, I'm a football fan myself. And, when I take my kids to see football, they don't endure the kind of rubbish that I used to.
No, I get that, but Weyman, that has changed surely beyond recognition from the 70s. I'm a Chelsea fan. I'm fully aware of what used to be said and sung and chanted, and was even given a free pass. That kind of horrendous vitriol that came from certain stands, but it doesn't look like that anymore, surely.
I wouldn't say that. I'm saying that even I'll give a quote from my own team when people are doing, hissing sounds when Tottenham was playing because it was the sound of the gas chambers, or when they're making noises which are not appropriate in terms of whatever it is. And they're my team, whatever it is. I've actually turned around to people at the game and told them to stop it, or argue to people and stuff like that. So it's not the case where I was threatened with physical violence when I used to go. But it's more the case that people still do inappropriate behaviour, and you have to turn around and say, actually, it's not compliant with the sport, or it's not compliant with a society that you want to be.
No, I get that, and inappropriate behaviour from the stands. Having been in the Matthew Harding end on more than one occasion. I know what can come out of there, and often it's a comment on a player's wife, or the fact that the surprise that a player even has a wife. There's all of that has gone on, and that perhaps is more about the psychology of crowds or certain scenarios with crowds. That doesn't excuse anything, by the way, but I think that there's a whole other issue to debate there. In terms of the knee thing, the George Floyd thing, I'm fascinated, Weyman, because I didn't expect you to mention specifically that, bearing in mind this was a case 4,000 miles away with no equivalence in the United Kingdom, no, as barbaric as what we saw was, no overt racist component to what happened to Mr. Floyd. Interesting that you think that it's reasonable to take the knee for that cause.
I think people take the knee as a global act against racism. Wherever you are, across the world, there was a moment where everybody took the knee. And they took the knee, not so much as
not everybody. Most people didn't take the knee, right?
Well, some people didn't take the knee. But
no, most people didn't take the knee, Weyman.
Well,
hardly anybody relatively took the knee, let's be clear.
Well, actually, in this country, it was the 260 places from land to growth to the end, where thousands of people participated in the events of taking the knee. It was quite widespread.
What do you think they were taking the knee for, then? What do you think those people were thinking when they did it?
Was that racism, colonialism, imperialism, ideas of people being superior against another group of people, acts of unity and stuff like that is something which we want to celebrate. We don't want to see this as a problem.
But this is in the United Kingdom. You know, we're a pretty progressive place. We've got issues. We'll always have issues. That's part of the proclivity of being a human being, if you like. It's not always pretty out there, and no one's going to defend those moments. But, I mean, the mere idea that this is Mississippi 1977 or even Hackney 1987 is nonsense, right?
Well, let's be clear about it. We've had people like Tommy Robinson in this country, homegrown, become an international sign of bigotry and hatred.
He would deny that, of course.
Well, we have. We have had the English football lads marching en masse.
But we've got Stand Up to Racism. We've got Kick It Out. They're greater campaigns, far more powerful campaigns.
Well, I think it's because the majority of people support a multiracial, multi-faith society.
I think you're absolutely spot on. I think you're spot on. And when we've made that kind of progress and somebody comes along and says, you boy, get on your knee, then there is that sense of, hang on a second, who the heck do you think you are? Get on my knee for what? I'm part of a progressive, moving forward country here. And the idea that by not getting on my knee, my silence is violence, is offensive to a lot of people, Weyman.
The reason why people were booing was because they didn't understand the necessity of unity. There was an MP in this country called Joe Cox was murdered in this country, an 8.5 stone woman, by somebody who thought that she was letting down the side to have a multiracial, multi-faith society. And, you know, that was the first MP in my living memory.
I agree. Nobody is about to gloss over those kind of moments. But my point is that my point is that a lot of football fans will probably think, hang on, firstly, this is politics in my game. I don't want to see it. Secondly, you're trying to define me as some kind of perpetrator of everything you've just talked about. And thirdly, why are we dwelling on one of hundreds of incidents involving black people and white people at the hands of the police that happen 4,000 miles away? I mean, there's a cocktail of things there that could give people the ache, right?
No, I think we're saying that we live in a society that, unfortunately, racism and discrimination. Look, I think that racism, Islamophobia and anti-Semitism still exists in our society, and we have to do everything we can to minimise it and make sure that it doesn't actually become something which is damaging. And we've witnessed, as I said, an MP being killed on the streets inside Leeds. And when you look at the transcript of why somebody carried out such a heinous crime, they're very, very clear to say that the reason why they did that was because they believe in fundamental unequal society. So I think in memory to those people, and actually to, next month in January, it's Holocaust Memorial Day. And actually what we've learned from that, I grew up in East London with the Jewish community in East London. What I learned from that was the most important thing to do is to do something when organisations are small or when they put forward ideas that are heinous or division. We've got an ex-president, I'm glad to say, who actually thinks it's almost illegal for people of colour to vote. And I think we have to understand this is a problem.
On that point, Weyman Bennett, thank you, co-governor of Stand Up to Racism, with us here on Talk Radio. I wasn't aware of the Trump non-white people voting thing. Anyway, that's a distraction. Let's get to the central point. You heard what he said. You heard what our previous guest, Professor Ellis Cashmore, said as well. 0344 499 1000.